Antimage and Isekai LitRPG Adventure, Ends of Magic Book 1, audiobook by Kevin Chapter 32 Money, where your mouth is Nathan took a few steps backwards from the encroaching constructs as he considered his new class skills. He didn't have time to fully figure them out, much less their interactions. But they seemed to fit the ticket for what needed to happen, because the one thing that the heirs didn't have was time. One of these days I'll be able to sit down and actually consider my class choice. Only 49 more levels to go until my next chance. Between one step and the next, Nathan reversed direction. He sprinted at the four-legged bugs as they skittered toward him. They showed no sign of surprise, raising their cutting arms once more. Right before Nathan entered the construct's attack range, he triggered his new skill, his rage skill. The world seemed to pulse, then slow down. Nathan's vision narrowed and he looked across at the 8 metal constructs, his foes. The one closest to Nathan executed the same aggressive lunge as before, but Nathan crouched and leaped forward, going low as the cutting blade whistled down. Behind him, Nathan had moved more quickly than ever before and was underneath the bug construct. He was tempted to rip the metal limbs off the bug and beat it to death with them. But it wasn't the constructs he was most pissed at. It was the bunker, just sitting there with magical beams that could stun people from 100 feet away. The bug reacted quickly, striking out with its back legs as Nathan ran out from underneath it. Each of the constructs' limbs were serrated on the inside surface, and one of those vicious cutting edges struck Nathan across the back of his left leg. But a blow that moments ago would have torn his leg off only left a deep cut, and instead of being knocked down, Nathan just staggered for a few steps and kept running. Another bug lunged at him from behind, the tip of its cutting blade slicing across Nathan's back. It caught on bone and jerked him sideways but failed to cut through his spinal cord. Ha! I've got 2 different resilience buffs right now. Eat my dust, bugs. Nathan jumped over an adventurer corpse and kept running. His thrill and fury had only intensified with each injury, and he felt like he was in a tunnel with only the bunkers present at the other end. The pounding of metal on stone came from behind him as the constructs gave chase. Nathan focused on the bunkers and the street he needed to cross to get there. His chest came up, arms driving down. He flexed his feet with each step, propelling him forward with stamina and all of the enhanced strength his rage provided. For the second time, he was in a race against constructs trying to kill him, and he was winning. Congratulations, you have developed the low-tier sprinting utility skill into mid-tier sprinting. Utility skill, mid-tier sprinting. This skill will help you run very quickly in the future, will not allow you to run in circumstances where you couldn't otherwise. His gait had started uneven due to the leg wound, but it smoothed out as the cut healed. His hand was mostly regenerated too, but the combined costs of his rapid healing, rage, and use of stamina to empower his movements took its toll. His stamina flickered down. Stamina, 105/420 high-tier regeneration rank 2 achieved. There wasn't much he could do about it except eat the invisible barrier that blocked Sarah's arrow. Nathan noticed the turrets aligning themselves in his direction. He started dodging and weaving, not expecting much warning before. A metal bolt shot past Nathan as he juked. The one from the other turret hit him in the right shoulder. It pierced skin and sunk into bone, the tip barely emerging from his back. Nathan's vision tinged red for a moment, but he kept running. He grabbed the 2-foot projectile in his left hand and yanked it free with a grunt. His stamina briefly stopped plummeting as the glowing swirls engraved into the bolt flickered and dimmed. Low-tier dodging footwork rank 8 achieved. Everything here is magic. Speaking of, Nathan impacted the barrier of force in front of the building. It was thick, with multiple strands of force mana layered on top of each other. But Nathan had practiced against Stella's force mana a lot. He moved at a speed enhanced by everything stamina, raging thrill, and mid-tier sprinting could provide. and all that speed was fueling Juggernaut's inertia and anti-magic momentum. Mid-tier sprinting rank 2 achieved. The barrier shattered into pieces, and Nathan greedily sucked in all the force mana he could. Then he hit a second barrier, which suffered the same fate. The third slowed him down such that he didn't slam into the bunker. Instead, he plunged his fists into the spotlight-like magical constructs powering the stupefaction beams that were suppressing the airs. There were crystals of some kind inside, and Nathan yanked them out. The beam emitters were arranged in 3 rows of 2, about 5 feet between each horizontal row. He leapt and clambered up the device framework to reach the rest of the magical constructs, ripping their innards out as he went. A quiet whine pulled Nathan's attention to the right, where the turret atop the other bunker was tracking him. He jumped up, pulling with his hands as he pushed with his feet. The bolt that had been aimed at his head passed just in front of his knees, skittering off the bunker's metallic surface. Wow, I can really jump with this raging thrill. Let's crush some uppity magical constructs. Nathan felt exhilarated as he landed directly in front of the other turret. It also began to whine as it charged to fire. Luckily, Nathan could move faster than it could track, and he zipped around behind it and grabbed the base of the turret. It was solidly constructed, with a hard outer shell and a tough ring attaching it to the bunker. After a few seconds, Nathan wasn't making any progress, even tugging with all the strength of his rage. He hissed, wrestling with the stubborn metal as he tried to rip the turret out of its housing. He was keeping the metallic bulk between him and the other turret, which seemed disinclined to fire. Darn, that would have been easy. The constructs had reached the bunker and were attempting to climb it. Luckily, they kept slipping off the near-vertical surface. Nathan's stamina was running low, having depleted the boost from the magic barriers. He was about to reach inside the barrel of the turret when he noticed a new sound. It was a harsh crackling, like a Tesla coil. Nathan looked up and saw a crystal above the door that the bunkers were positioned to either side of. It served as the centerpiece of some kind of crest above the building's entrance. It was also clearly powering up, glowing with magical energy and sparking with loud cracks. Nathan hunkered down, holding tightly to the turret as it strained to rotate towards him. For what we are about to receive, may we be thankful his vision widened out as the crystal unleashed its magic. It was certainly lightning mana, but Nathan could tell nothing about what the spell looked like. Even with magic absorption, his body seized and his heart skipped a beat as the lightning continued for a few seconds. Nathan could smell skin scorching as the metal underneath his palms went red-hot. He released the turret. It sat there glowing and smoking, no longer turning to face him. He shook himself and felt the residual shock work out of his system. Stamina, 395/420 magic absorption rank 3 achieved. Nathan ducked down as the other turret fired at his head. Now that he was up close to them, the turret's charging whine made dodging them a lot easier. He stood up and looked at the turret. It was time for some revenge. He took a few steps backwards for a run-up, then leapt from one bunker to the other, laughing maniacally as he flew across the 20-foot gap. He didn't quite make it but caught the edge of the bunker with his fingers and hauled himself up. Once again, he skipped around the turret before it could reload and draw a bead on him. He looked up at the lightning crystal, but it wasn't charging up again. No such luck. So, Nathan did the only thing that occurred to his rage-addled brain. He stuck his hand into the barrel of the turret and felt around. He scratched his hand on the tip of the loaded bolt, then found a small metal tab on the side of the barrel. He grabbed and yanked, tearing out a thin, enchanted piece of metal. The turret jerked erratically and spun upwards to face the sky. It loosed a wild bolt high into the air, aimed at nothing. Satisfied it was out of commission, Nathan looked down from the top of the second bunker. The emitters for the remaining stupefaction beams were below him, still focused on the airs. Surrounding him on every other side were the 8 bug-like constructs that had harried him in the street. Nathan rubbed his hands together, calculating how best to jump down and take them out. Wait a second, that's not the objective here. That's my rage talking. He took a few steps back from the edge, standing still to activate focused mind and examine the battlefield. It was a struggle to focus past the rage. Koch had gotten Stella out of the line of fire, but Arl was still gazing blankly, and Sarah was sprawled out in the street in the same place she'd fallen. The image hit Nathan like a splash of cold water. He almost let go of his rage, before clenching his fists and springing to action. He jumped off the bunker and landed on top of the 2 stupefaction beam emitters below him, striking with his heels as he landed. The metal frames warped and deformed under his feet. Nathan's plan had been to repeat the motion, crushing all 6 of the magical devices as he descended the bunker. Unfortunately, the buckling metal robbed him of his balance, and he tumbled, scrabbling for a handhold. He found one, grabbing onto the base of one of the beam emitters farther down with his left hand. It bent down towards him as his weight overwhelmed whatever mechanism it used to aim. Nathan pulled on the handhold to swing himself up and punched his right hand into the adjacent magical spotlight. As he did so, one of the bug constructs leapt and slashed, grazing Nathan's butt. I think it'll take all of my stamina and a little while to regrow a single limb, so let's try not to get dismembered. But I need to get rid of these beams. Nathan yanked at the housing of the device he was hanging from with both hands, feeling the strength induced by his rage coursing through his muscles. He didn't rip it off the bunker, but definitely broke the aiming mechanism. He'd also lifted himself up a few feet, dodging the next slash from the bug constructs below. Nathan looked down. 2 more magical spotlights were aimed out at the airs. Below them, 8 chrome and steel constructs waited with readied blades. Nathan's lips peeled back in a rictus grin. This raging thrill is better than anything I've ever felt before. I've trashed whatever this place was. And here I am about to leap into the jaws of shiny death for my friends. Who wouldn't dream of such a thing? What a rush. Then Nathan jumped. He slammed his feet into the beam emitters, hearing a satisfying crunch as his full weight bore down on them. He didn't try for a clean jump this time, instead toppling forward towards the nearest of the bug constructs. It swung both bladed arms up. Nathan caught them on the outside of his forearms, roaring in challenge. The blades didn't cut his arms off, but they sliced to the bone. Nathan landed atop the central body of the bug. It staggered under his weight, almost collapsing to the ground. Nathan dodged preemptively, not needing to look for incoming attacks to know they were coming. He rolled to the side, falling toward the ground. All of his attention was focused on landing on his feet. Going down here meant death. Another cutting blade hit him in the ribs, carving a deep gouge and slapping him into the side of the construct he just rolled off. One of his feet landed on a metallic leg of that construct, which buckled under him. It upset his landing. Nathan landed awkwardly on one leg, already falling to the side. He tucked and rolled under another construct. There was a rush of wind as more blades whizzed over him. Ha! Invincibility frames. Can't hit me when I'm rolling. Pending utility skill. Low-tier tumbling. You have used acrobatic tricks to dodge blows from dangerous opponents. This skill will help you use unorthodox movements involving rolls and handsprings to avoid blows in the future. Nathan was on his feet again, standing just behind a construct. It reared up to strike with its back legs, but he didn't care. It was behind him and couldn't stop him now. There was one more construct blocking his path, and Nathan took 3 steps and slammed his fist into the spot where the legs connected to the body. He put his full body into the motion, pushing with his legs and bringing his hips up into the blow. The constructs were quite sturdy. The legs spasmed at Nathan's blow, but nothing obvious broke except some of his knuckles. All four of the construct's legs left the ground as the metallic bug lurched into the air. Nathan ran forward, meaning to take advantage of the opening. Then a blade hit him in the side of the head from behind. He staggered, almost going down from the blow. Only his single-minded goal kept him moving past the burst of pain and confusion. And nausea couldn't forget the nausea. Gotta escape. Not dying here. Giant's Rest will hear from me again. Nathan wavered and wobbled, picking up speed as he ran. Blood coursed down from his head wound. All of his attention was focused on the building the heirs had retreated into. It slid back and forth across his vision, and Nathan's balance was shot. He almost fell crossing the wide street twice, only catching himself by running faster. Then he tripped over a corpse and ran headfirst into a stone wall. He fell, and the cool stone of the street pressed against his cheek. Chapter 33, The Payoff of Risk. Nathan lost a moment, stunned from yet another blow to the head. He became aware of movement, of hands grabbing him. Don't lose the plot now. He settled into focused mind and tried to direct his regeneration to his head. He pictured the proper layout of the brain and meninges, but Nathan couldn't fully hold the image. He squeezed his eyes closed, concentrating on staying conscious. Moment by moment his mind felt clearer and more focused. Then the process stopped. Stamina, 0-4-20 mid-tier focused mind rank 10 achieved. Congratulations, you have maxed out this skill. It cannot be improved any further. You must achieve insight into this skill to develop it to the next level. Nathan's eyes cracked open. Arl was carrying him though a ruined building. The wiry man staggered under Nathan's weight, but they passed through a door before Arl roughly set Nathan down against a wall. Nathan was still woozy, but his eyes could mostly focus now. Kachai leaned over Stella in the corner, and Sarah slumped against the wall, sipping from a healing potion and holding her side. Nathan reached up to touch his head wound. His hand came away sticky with blood, but there wasn't a great rent in his head that exposed his brain or anything. Unfortunately, he was still bleeding pretty badly. Blood streamed from the gouge along his ribs, and the cuts on each forearm welled with bright red blood. Good thing I don't get woozy when I see blood. Oh, there's the shock. He gestured weakly towards Stella. Magic, out of stamina, needs some magic. They had extra healing potions, but when he'd tested them during training, they just tasted bad. Apparently alchemy was magical enough that Nathan was immune. It wasn't all negative. That result meant he would likely be immune to magical poisons. Stella laughed weakly, coughing. Still need me, I guess. Come over here. She waved Nathan over with a feeble motion. Nathan got up, nearly overbalancing. Arl grabbed him under the shoulder and helped Nathan across the room. His footsteps left blotches of blood on the floor. Stella wasn't doing much better. It looked like she'd taken a bolt from one of the turrets to the chest. Her enchanted robe seemed to have slowed the bolt enough that it hadn't gone through her like the one that had speared Nathan. Kachai had removed the bolt and was continuing to heal her, chanting quiet prayers over her supine body. Kachai's legs were wet with his own blood, but he paid his own wounds no mind as he chanted over his friend. By the valor of Damon, let these wounds be healed. Taken in righteous battle, this injury will not fell a valiant warrior. I ask you, Damon, stem the flow of blood and mend this wound, that Stella Caxal may fight virtuously another day. Nathan collapsed to the ground next to Stella. Her hand flopped to the ground next to him, palm lit with fire. Nathan took her clean hand with his bloody ones, cupping the fire like it was his only source of warmth in a blizzard. Stella laughed at that, her cough a little stronger this time. Then the fire increased in size, growing larger and larger until it would have touched the ceiling without Nathan absorbing the mana. It wasn't a complicated spell, just a larger but less disciplined derivative of the blowtorch spell that they'd fought over on the first day. This time, Nathan wasn't trying to disrupt the spell. He was trying to suck as much stamina as he could from it, and then feed it to his injuries in order of priority. It was a surprisingly intimate moment, with Nathan and Stella softly chuckling at the ridiculousness of the situation. She was healing him from life-threatening wounds by setting him on fire, while she was also being treated for a deadly injury. Sarah called over after a minute, her voice tinged with pain. "If you are enjoying yourselves so much, can I get Kache over here? I need a bit of divine love on my ribs." Kache ignored her, finishing his prayer. "Continue to be your faithful servant in righteous battle. Praise to Damon, may his grace be granted." He released Stella, who was looking much healthier. Then he rose and walked over to Sarah. Nathan looked around for Kache's shield and hammer. They'd been discarded in the corner of the room. The shield had 2 bolts sticking all the way through the heavy metal. The tips were red with the wolf man's blood. Arl came back into the room. "The sentry constructs are keeping their distance for now. They don't seem to want to go too far from that building they're guarding. They seem uncertain now that their support fire is offline." He threw an acknowledging hand gesture towards Nathan. Nathan hadn't noticed Arl leave, but he was glad that somebody was maintaining their situational awareness. Sarah spoke through gritted teeth as Kache poked at her ribcage. "Then they will be easy targets from here. Stella and I can take them apart from inside the building. Those constructs are too large to fit into these hallways." Nathan was uneasy. In his mind, the correct thing to do was run the hell away. Stella spoke next. "I want to take my pride from their carcasses. Nathan, you good? You're having a little problem with, clothes." Nathan was much better. He wasn't exactly full of stamina, but all his wounds were healed. He looked down at himself. He was also mostly naked, with his underwear hanging off one leg. However, that was somewhat less remarkable than the fact that he was almost entirely covered with blood, all of it his own. High-tier regeneration rank 3 achieved. Nonetheless, he answered, Yeah, I'm better. Can I get some pants and food? I think we should get back to Gemor right now and report this." Kache rose, pulling Sarah up. "I am running a bit low on faith and still need to finish healing myself, but it seems that we are able to fight. This is a threat we encountered on our patrol, and we would be remiss to leave it behind. I agree with Sarah and Stella. We will not run back to Gemor when we have the ability to end this threat now." He started chanting again, this time with his hands crossed across his chest. Stella had dug into her dimensional bag and handed Nathan a pair of short pants, a rag, and some pastries. He stuffed a slightly bloody pastry into his mouth before turning around. Then he used the rag to start wiping away the worst of the blood before delicately putting on his pants. It would be a terrible idea to keep attacking whatever the fuck this building was. He tried to voice his thoughts. "We almost died already. I don't think it's in our weight class. We should back off, get some experts. Remember the lessons on dungeoneering. You don't do a dungeon you don't know anything about." Sarah responded curtly. "We didn't die, and I will not let a near fight scare me. We know what we're facing, and the threat is much less now that you have disabled many of the defenses. We aren't in the dungeon. We can knock down those constructs, clear a threat from the streets of Old Gemor. Then we can gather information on what this is, maybe peek inside and submit what we learned to the guild. We might even get to come back for it. It's common for the team that discovers a dungeon to be offered the chance to clear it." Arl and Kache nodded in agreement. But Nathan was growing even more convinced this was a bad idea. "The outermost defenses almost handed our ass to us. I don't want to assume it's out of tricks, and there's something else bothering me." Nathan asked about what was concerning him. Guys, why haven't we leveled? Is the fight still happening? Arl, didn't you say the constructs were backing off?" Kache frowned. "That is somewhat odd. Davrar must believe the fight is not over. Arl, you counted 8 outside. Are we sure that none are sneaking up on us?" Arl nodded, and they all took a second to listen for anything off. Sarah continued. "We should take a look out front. No need to commit yet. Nathan, nobody will accuse you of cowardice after what you did, but we must have our chance to prove ourselves here. Our parents have told us stories about fights like this for years." And that's the problem. You all have heard stories of your parents, powerful adventurers all, triumphing over terrible enemies. Survivorship bias, as well as unrealistic expectations. None of us are on that level of power yet. I don't know if we can even take on those sentries. They threw a hell of a lot of magic my way at the drop of a hat. Nathan hesitated, uncertain how to convince them without being demeaning. Stella was already walking towards the door, and Kachai picked up his hammer and shield and followed her. Nathan was forced to go after them just to continue the conversation. It wasn't a far walk to the front of the ruined building. There was an empty door frame and pair of wrecked windows that looked out onto the street. Nathan noticed another metal bolt sticking through the wall next to the door. He shivered. Whoever built this place did not skimp on defenses. There are definitely more layers, more contingencies than what I saw. With that thought in mind, he studied the front of the building. The look-away magic and illusions were starting to reassert themselves, but now that Nathan knew what was there, it was easy to penetrate. All 8 of the bug constructs were acting just as Arl had said, guarding the front door from approach now that the defenses were offline. Nathan studied the building carefully for a moment, breathing out and activating focused mind. He leaned into notice, looking for important details. The building was nondescript but sturdy. The windows were heavily barred and set high in the walls. It looked something like a prison, but the bunkers out front made it seem like a military headquarters. There weren't a lot of obvious details, besides the windows and some carvings on the walls. The carvings were abstract, some crests and flowing lines of decorative stonework that embellished an otherwise barren facade. Nathan didn't see anything unusual, but something bothered him about the building. He let himself relax, trying not to look for anything but rather see what came to him. After a brief moment, a pattern jumped out at him. Some of the bars on the windows subtly aligned with the carvings in the stone. What really made him pay attention was that it reminded him of the mana flows he'd felt from spellwork. Not the engravings that made enchantments. It looked like a spell was engraved onto the wall, with the windows as the focal points. Recalling the spells he'd interacted with, the flows looked like a light spell, reminding Nathan of the beams of intense light that Cullal had sent his way when he developed magic absorption. He never would have seen it without relaxing and letting his spell sense work with his notice. Congratulations, you have developed the low-tier notice, utility skill into mid-tier notice. Utility skill, mid-tier notice. This skill will help you notice details in the future. Especially useful for detecting concealed magical effects and triggers. He elbowed Stella, who had been discussing target prioritization with Sarah in a quiet voice. Do those 4 windows and the carvings on the walls behind them make a single symbol, one that reminds you of light mana? Stella frowned at him, then followed his pointing finger. It's not an enchantment, but I think I can see what you mean. She paused, narrowing her eyes and fingering her braid as she concentrated. There's some mana flowing through it, but what can it do? It's not an enchantment on the building. Nathan thought for a second. Could it be a one-shot spell? You flow mana through a pathway in something solid and it makes the spell. Low-tier Identify 7 achieved. I think that means I'm right. Stella was backing up as she shook her head. No, we can't do that. The material interferes, but if you could. She looked up at the spell carved into the building and her eyes went wide. It's huge. We should run. Arl had been silently listening and he turned immediately, sprinting down the corridor. Stella followed him. Sarah and Kachai were slower on the uptake, but they quickly followed. Nathan took up the rear, figuring that if they were about to get hit with some sort of giant death laser, he should probably be in back. He was tempted to stay and moon the building but followed the rest of the heirs closely. They ran through the ruins. There wasn't a back exit, but Stella solved that problem by slicing through the back wall with blades of force. The building creaked alarmingly, but they didn't stay for long. They all ran into the next crumbling edifice, clambering over some piles of rubble and working their way around a collapsed hallway. Eventually, the heirs emerged onto the next street over. Nathan was sweating, waiting for Davrar to decide the fight was over. That would probably happen when they were out of range of the presumable death laser. And now they were a whole block away, on the other side of two fairly large buildings, and it still wasn't happening. Even I might not survive that at close range. Glad I didn't moon it after all. Kachai barked at them to get into formation and directed the group a few streets away and back towards the transit road. They kept up a quick jog, not wanting to run into any terrible dangers. They'd almost gotten back to the transit road before Davrar finally decided the fight was over. You have leveled up to level 43. Congratulations, you have escaped an extraordinarily dangerous trap that has felled many adventurers higher level than you without losing a single teammate. Phew. Congratulations, Nathan Lark. Now that you have developed your class and exited the fight, you are no longer at a disadvantage. Davrar congratulates you on overcoming your difficult beginning and welcomes you to the Davrar experience. Nuts. Chapter 34 Return to safety. They moved quickly back to Gemor, traveling along the space-distorting transit road. At a jog, it took only minutes, and Nathan marveled for what must have been the third time at the incredible enchanted road. He once again hoped his still somewhat bloody feet weren't causing problems for its magic. His stamina wasn't ticking up from magic absorption, so that meant something. The guards at the gate raised weapons as the heirs approached. Their rapid advance, combined with the blood and torn clothes, was probably pretty alarming, or lack of clothes in Nathan's case. Nathan saw their eyes lingering on the bolt still stuck through Kachai's shield. One of them called out, her voice booming across the square. "Threat incoming." Kachai slowed for a moment to respond. "No threats. We think we found a new dungeon out along the North Road." The statement was met with a mixed response. Some of the guards swore but relaxed from their ready stances. Others laughed nervously. Everybody started paying close attention. The guard who was speaking moderated her volume as they got closer. "Then you'd be headed for the Adventurers Guild. Gotta do some quick checks first. No amount of swimming in blood'll get you through without it." She eyed Nathan. "Right, you. Well, check them first." She gestured to the rest of the heirs. They were checked over quickly but thoroughly. The guards were interested in what had happened but didn't want to hold the heirs up for a full accounting. After a quick aura scan and cross-check that everybody could answer basic questions and account for each other, they asked every member of the heirs to vouch that Nathan hadn't been replaced by anything that could duplicate his total lack of a magical aura. They admitted that they'd lost sight of him for some time during the fight, and that caused the woman commanding the guards to sigh. She asked some more questions about the fight, her eyebrows climbing as Arl recounted a very short version of what he'd seen. She shot a look at Nathan. "He's got good protection from mind magic." Every single one of the heirs nodded enthusiastically. "If it was in the middle of a fight against constructs, there's probably not much chance of a soul eater, but we'll keep a note that there's a risk here. Sorry, we'll have to keep an eye on you and somebody'll check in with you in a few days." "Protocol," she shrugged. Nathan wasn't sure why she was so apologetic. He'd heard of some of the insidious parasites or magics that could infect people here. Some merely took a little while to trigger a psychopathic break, sending the infected into a killing frenzy. The worst, like the Soul Eater, could spread themselves to others if given time, invasion of the body snatcher's style. Nathan would put up with a lot of inconvenience if it meant they had better protection against something like that. He wasn't sure how magical that process was, or if he was immune or not. And he never wanted to find out. "Just watch, now I'm gonna find out. I think Davrar's making me fatalistic." After being waved through the city gates, they made a beeline to the Adventurers Guild. People stepped out of their way on the streets, and a hush descended in the main hall as they entered. Nathan saw people inside counting them, checking to see if all of the heirs had returned. He supposed that seeing somebody covered in blood tended to do that, though none of them were pristine. Kacha went straight to the counter, where an unfamiliar clerk turned to greet him. A heavy tread approached, and a hand clapped Nathan on the shoulder. Given how hard it hit him, Nathan knew who it was before he turned around. "What's happened with you, my friend Nathan Lark? You look like you got chewed up by a castle bear and came out the other end. Here's hoppin', you didn't find a few stalkers be too much." Nathan looked down at Eldred Vanguard, assessing the man's shiny bald head and enchanted armor. He was very slightly tempted to see if his new rage class could best Eldred in the ring, but he was almost certain it wouldn't. Eldred was high level and had beaten Artha. Furthermore, it would serve no point and might make him an enemy. Instead, he answered politely. "Had no problems with some stalkers, actually. But I think we found a new dungeon, hidden under a nasty illusion that covered a bunch of adventurer corpses. Wonder if that's why the North Road has been so dangerous." Eldred withdrew his hand, squinting at Nathan. "Huh, that's so. A new dungeon inside Old Gemor. Big deal if that's what it is." He eyed Nathan slyly. "Buy you a drink if you got any more details to share." Arl stepped up beside Nathan. "We think it prudent to let the guildmistress decide what to do here. Debrief comes first." Eldred sighed, then walked away, waving a hand scornfully. "You're baying the guildmistress pets now, hidden things from those who have need to know, but I'll not argue." Koch returned and eyed Nathan. "I think we're going up to see the guildmistress in a minute. Shame that we can't hit you with a cleaning spell, Nathan. Do we have any more spare rags?" Nathan spent the next couple of minutes wiping away excess blood. His hair was a sticky mess that was going to require a bath, and his pair of pants would require some advanced cleaning magic to get all the bloodstains out. At least now he wasn't going to leave smears on any surfaces. They were interrupted by the front doors slamming open. Nathan caught a brown furred blur before Cullel had wrapped Stella in a smothering hug. "Damn, I'm pretty sure that's the fastest I've seen anybody move since the Guardians of Gemor swooped in to take out the Grave Tangle." "Oh, thank the divine that you're alive. We heard you'd been wounded and I just couldn't stop myself. What was this about a new dungeon on the North Road? We should never have let you go out that way. But you're okay now, yes?" She patted Stella all over, fingering the tear in her robe and the replacement shirt that Stella had thrown on underneath it. "You got hurt. How? What could have gone through this enchantment?" Dalo walked through the doors a moment later, looking worried. His clothes were notably mussed. "I couldn't stop her from flying here the moment she heard. Dear, leave them alone. I think they're about to go up and talk to Sudriel. We can ask them what happened later. After all, they're adventurers now. They need to follow the rules. We'll just wait here. It will be good to remember all the time we sat in this room. It's been years. Let's plan a close call party after this." He collected Cullel, who only released Stella with reluctance. She looked at Nathan and gasped. "Nathan, what happened to you? Is that all yours? I haven't seen anybody that bloody and still standing since Stainel. Well, we'll hear your story later. It seems the heirs have teeth after all." She flashed a smile with nearly as many teeth as Koch, then spun and joined her husband. Nathan noticed that most of the adventurers shot Dalo and Cullel wary looks, giving them a wide berth. Then it was time for them to follow the clerk upstairs to report to the guildmistress. Sarah spoke up in the stairway. "That was cute. Your parents are cute, and you shouldn't be ashamed, Stella. Stainel doesn't show himself to us that way. Sometimes we think he's just training us because it's what Mom would want." Arl shot her a complicated glance. She raised one eyebrow slightly and set her mouth in a slanting line. He just shrugged in response. "Twins, right. Not surprising they can communicate well." Stella seemed more embarrassed now that Sarah had called it out, flushing pink. "My mom is great, but she is too loving sometimes. I know she cares so much, but it seems impossible to take risks sometimes without getting scolded for it." Stella waved her hand back down the stairs, recalling her mother's unstoppable tirade. And I want to be an adventurer. I want to make things explode. Use magic to blow up things I don't like." Katja chuckled. "Well, we certainly took a risk today. Remember that your mother let you take this risk and wasn't hovering high in the sky to watch over us. Good thing, too, we wouldn't have gotten any levels at all. I was a bit worried about that, but now I've got the levels to prove that they weren't protecting us." Nathan was feeling around for new scars as they climbed. He'd been cut a lot today. There were lines in his skin where he'd suffered the deepest wounds. They looked like faint, decade-old scars, but they were there. I wonder if I'll be covered in those in a few years. I could probably figure out how to control it with regeneration at the next development. Something to think over later. Nathan shook his head, looking up to join the conversation. I don't think I would have minded having a little bit of support for that dungeon. We were fine with the stalkers, but that fight was nasty. I had to take my level 27 development in the middle of the fight. The heirs all grew quiet, glancing around at each other. They seemed to elect Arl. He had a thoughtful look on his face as he spoke. "I noticed you had some new capabilities. They seemed powerful. I hope you took a class that suits you, and not something that cripples you or goes against your nature. We would be filled with sadness if you jeopardized your future to save us." Nathan thought about that for a moment. The clerk was definitely listening in, and they were almost at the top of the stairs. "No, I don't think it did. I wish I'd gotten the chance to discuss with Artha, but I think I made the best choice. Definitely don't want to continue making those decisions in the middle of fights. Twice is enough for me." Stella looked down at him, her face concerned before it morphed to contentment. "I finally hit level 27 after that fight too. Today was my first time fighting without my parents around. Guess Davrar decided it was enough to finally push me over the edge, huh?" "What? Stella hadn't hit her class development. Jesus Christ. I'd assumed with her firepower she was over level 27. What now?" She starts shooting lightning bolts from her eyes. Then they were at the top of the stairs, the door into the guildmistress' office already open. Standing next to it and waving them in was the same Nulled with purple robes who had been here the first time Nathan had visited. They all trooped into the office and sat in the chairs before the broad desk. Sudriel raised her head from some kind of written report, looking past the heirs. "Siltal, sit. If they've discovered a dungeon, then you'll need all the details as well." The Nulled secretary stepped forward, grabbing the spare chair and setting it against the wall before sitting. He gazed unsettlingly at each of the heirs with his glowing, white-irised eyes as he brought out a fine slate to take notes. Chapter 35, A Violent Debrief. Sudriel waited a moment, then waved a wrinkled hand and prompted them kindly. "Well then, Hisla told me what you told her downstairs. Can you give a more detailed report? Kachai, start from the beginning." Kachai was clearly intimidated by the guildmistress, but after wetting his lips, he spoke. "Why yes, apologies. We departed on our blooding patrol early this morning, then reached our patrol area quickly. We surveyed the area and spotted signs of a stalker nest." Kachai nodded his head towards Nathan. "Then we proceeded towards it, ready for their ambush. There were 17 stalkers and a patriarch in that nest, but we triumphed with no great risk and no expenditure of permanent resources." He paused for a moment to see if there were any questions. The Nulled, whose name was apparently Siltal, spoke for the first time. His voice was high-pitched, dry and clipped. "3 questions. Where was the nest? Were the bodies disposed of? Did you harvest anything?" Kachai continued the report. "It was located about 5 city blocks west-southwest from the old community hall. Ruined residential building, nothing notable about it. Stella Caxal incinerated the bodies to an acceptable level after the fighting. We harvested a few teeth, especially from the patriarch." Arl brought out the 2 large canines. Nathan shivered at the sight of the foot-long pieces of sharpened ivory. They disturbed him more now as trophies than when they were in the mouth of the thing trying to eat him. Go figure. Siltal made some notes on his slate, speaking as he did so. Commendable for a first patrol both in execution and cleanup. Please continue. After a deep breath, Kachai continued. After that, we proceeded to finish the patrol. We surveyed both sides of the transit road over the course of several hours. We encountered the new dungeon at maximum patrol distance to the east of the North Transit Road on a secondary boulevard. I would be able to mark it on a map. As for the dungeon itself, it was hidden by magic. Very well hidden. There were illusions and mental magic involved, and I'll let Nathan Lark describe what happened. He got the best look past all of that. Most of us were disabled. Everybody's eyes tracked to Nathan. The heirs watched him just as intently as Siltal and the guildmistress. Nathan supposed that he wasn't sure how much of the fight they'd seen through the broken illusion, look-away magic and stupefaction beams. The heirs hadn't taken a break to talk since then, and they probably wanted to know Nathan's perspective on the whole encounter. He considered for a moment before launching into his tale. We were walking along the street when I noticed we weren't in formation. I looked around and sensed a magical effect of some kind, both a look-away compulsion and an illusion. I thought it might be a Giant's Rest ambush, so I broke the illusion. It was covering a fortified building, not a group of Giant's Rest mages. There were 2 bunkers on either side of a single entrance, and 8 of these weird 4-legged metal constructs. They had 2 slashing arms and could fire a bunch of different types of magic. Sarah broke in. Sentry constructs of old Gemor. Stainel described them to us once, she swallowed as if just recalling something, and told us to hope we never ran into any. There was a moment of silence. Siltal's chalk made a few brief, hesitant marks. He looked uncertainly at Sudriel. The guildmistress looked thunderously upset, described their magic and attacks in detail. Nathan thought back, making use of his enhanced memory, to replay the frantic seconds where the constructs had attacked him with magic. They started by hitting me with small bolts of fire, blades of force, lightning, and acid. When that didn't work, they shifted to other attacks. I remember spikes of ice, a spell of pure cold, some bolts of death mana. Also light mana beams, sharpened bolts of force, and balls of stone. They tried pretty comprehensively to find a weakness. Sudril's face had grown darker as he spoke, and she hissed as he finished. That matches their full spell repertoire. Siltal marked that as confirmation of 8 fully functional old Gemor sentry constructs with open engagement parameters. She spoke the last words as you would a curse, then gestured for Nathan to continue. The bunkers had 2 armaments. Each one had a turret on top that fired enchanted metal bolts, accurate and armor-piercing. One went straight through me, and others pierced Kachai's shield. Stella was hit in the first salvo. Kachai lifted his shield, which served as a wonderful way to display the 2-foot metal bolts and their penetrating power. Stella again fingered the tear in her enchanted robes. Nathan continued. But that wasn't the worst part. The bunkers also had these beam things on the front, 6 on each, 12 total. They cast a ray of barely visible light that could stun people. I don't know what it felt like, but those pinned down the rest of my team pretty well. He looked back at Arl. What was it like? Arl replied, shaking his head. Like somebody was casting daze on you multiple times a second. We've all got our ways to deal with mind magic, but that was just too much, especially when there were multiple of those things focused on each of us. Hear me, but it was a good thing Nathan was immune. Nathan shuddered. That sounded awful, just being continually dazed while you knew death approached. Then he cleared his throat. Right. This won't make much sense if I don't tell you I took my level 27 class development right then and had some new abilities. Not going to go into details, but it let me get past the sentries and reach the bunkers. They were protected by a triple-layer force barrier. Each one was tougher than what Stella can cast. He shot an apologetic look at the auburn-haired mage. She waved it away, clearly not upset at being outclassed by an ancient dungeon's defenses. Nathan turned towards Sudriel again. Right. So I got through the barriers, broke all of the day's beams on one of the bunkers while climbing to the top to get away from the sentry constructs. I was trying to break the turret that was shooting bolts when this crystal thing above the door hit me with a bolt of lightning. Nathan did some quick math based on his mana conversion efficiencies and how much stamina the lightning bolt had restored. I think it was at least a 700 mana spell. Enhanced memory coming to the rescue once again, there was a quiet exhalation from the other heirs. Stella's shocked voice sounded from the side. Dragon's breath, more than 700, Siltal broke in, his voice dry and a little sarcastic. That number appears plucked from the grave. Do you have a way to quantify the power of spells cast against you? I find it hard to believe you survived such a spell. Stella jumped in. He survived a disintegrate and can estimate spell strength pretty accurately, at least with me and my parents in practice. Still, 700. Nathan, are you sure? Stella was looking at him like she'd never seen him before. Nathan shrugged. He supposed that was probably about 3 times Stella's entire mana pool, so it made sense she was shocked. The lightning nearly melted the turret I was trying to break. It was a strong spell. Anyway, I jumped to the other bunker and was able to break that turret without a bolt of lightning. Then I broke the other day's beams and dodged past the sentries to return to the heirs, who had escaped after I broke the day's beams. He equivocated a bit, waving his arms around. It was a bit more complicated than that, but not in any important way. After that, we thought about trying to take down the sentries, but there was some sort of light spell, not an enchantment, carved into the building that was powering up. So we left, and came straight back here. Nathan paused, about to indicate his tale was done. Then he remembered another detail, one he probably should have mentioned earlier. One more thing. There were bodies in the street in front of the building, covered by the illusion. They were wearing armor and some of them were pretty old. I didn't count them, but maybe 24. Sudriel put her palms over her eyes for a moment, then shot a look at Siltal before turning back to the heirs. To summarize and ensure understanding. A building of old Gemor, hidden by mental and illusion magic. Behind that magic were 8 sentry constructs, 2 turrets firing enchanted armor-piercing bolts, 12 days beams, and a short-range defensive crystal capable of extraordinarily powerful lightning magic, all protected by a triple force shield. Then further unknown defenses you did not see activate, including a single-shot spellform glyph. The turrets and days beams are now disabled, assuming there's no repair functionality. Yes. They all nodded at Sudriel's summary, but there was another detail that was niggling at Nathan. The sentries were creeping up to ambush us before the illusion dropped. If we were taken by surprise and not even paying attention due to the look away, it would have been a very scary ambush. Sudriel just sat there for a moment. She was old, but every time Nathan had seen her she'd acted so intently that it was easy to forget her apparent age. Her gray eyes had been focused, her questions direct. Now she gazed off into the distance, looking positively ancient. Her mouth opened unconsciously, and Nathan thought she was going to moan or start crying. Then she stood up, and with a casual motion, hurled her chair out the window. It wasn't a small chair, and Nathan goggled as the nearly skeletal woman casually hucked a large armchair with one hand. The window shattered and sprayed glass into the courtyard below. In 2 quick motions, her spear was in her hand and she hurled it out of the window, high into the night. There was a shriek as the chair smashed across the stones 40 feet down. "Harpy's tits, Sudriel," somebody shouted from below. What in all of the secrets of Kali's was that for? The guildmistress stood silhouetted by the shattered window, gazing out into the night. Her thin robe blew in the breeze, and her entire posture seemed ready to leap out of the opening and go to battle. She held out her hand, and the spear zipped back towards her and slapped into her palm. Her gaze turned down into the courtyard, and she swore at whoever had yelled. "Tivora, go fuck a muck grabber." The heirs sat stunned in their chairs, watching the furious guildmistress stare out into the night. Backlit and with spear in hand, she looked more like a Valkyrie than an octogenarian. After a minute she turned around, jaw clenched. She stood behind the desk and stared at them. Her voice was calm, but with an undertone of cold fury. "So, this is what's been killing teams along the North Road. It has hidden so well our search teams did not find it, and it almost killed you as well. I am glad it didn't, and glad we know what lurks there so we can finally deal with it." The fury leaked through, her voice increasing in volume. Why did old Gemor have to be so blasphemously paranoid? A bunch of stupid fools trying to save themselves is what they were, and now it's killed yet more good people. It's yet another secret police headquarters or military arsenal or research facility, with stupidly powerful and powerfully stupid security. Siltel made a few more emphatic marks on his slate as the guildmistress fumed. His voice was dry, even as his beard blew in the breeze swirling around the office. "I assume this dungeon will be prioritized for next delve day. Do we want to send a team to scout and disable the exterior defenses?" Sudriel looked around for her chair, then turned to look out the window. She sighed. "Yes, of course. We'll need a detailed written report from the heirs by tomorrow afternoon. Start reaching out to the delve scholars. I'll ask Jalba for a debrief with the rest of the trainees tomorrow. This'll be a valuable learning experience. Oh, and all of you," she looked over all the heirs. "I'm proud of you for this. This new dungeon has killed many before you, but you showed the best trait of adventures. You survived. Some teams would have gone back to kill the sentries, but you did not. This sort of behavior is exactly what I wish to encourage with the training course, and I want you to know that I appreciate your taking those lessons to heart. I will be proud to have you graduate on the solstice." The rest of the heirs darted guilty looks to Nathan. Sudriel caught the looks and smirked. "Thank you for the debrief. I apologize for my outburst, and Siltel will see that you get a finder's fee for the last dungeon of Old Gemor. He will also walk you through the report and have you mark the dungeon's location on a map." They recognized it for the dismissal it was, and were all getting to their feet when Sudriel called out once more. "Nathan, can you stay behind for a moment?" Chapter 36 Private Conversation. Stella looked surprised and on the verge of protesting, but Sarah grabbed her by the arm and towed her out of the room. Kachai gave Nathan's shoulder a firm squeeze before Siltel let him out and closed the door. Sudriel put her spear in the holder next to the desk. She came around the edge of the desk, pausing to open a drawer in the side and extract a bottle and 2 glass cups. She set them down and spun 2 of the chairs in front to face each other. She sat in one and offered the other to Nathan. Nathan tentatively sat, taking the offered glass. Sitting across from the guildmistress like this was odd. She looked positively ancient, but her every motion was imbued with strength, a certainty that suggested somebody strong and confident in their actions. "I wonder what level she is." Sudriel had taken a moment to collect her thoughts, then raised her glass in the familiar gesture for a respectful toast. Nathan clinked her glass gently, and they both drank deeply. Nathan's nose was overwhelmed by the assault of strong, cinnamon-flavored whiskey that had an extra shot of sourness. It was remarkably smooth for its level of spice, and he managed not to cough. The drink reminded him of Fireball, but a bit weaker and significantly more sour. The guildmistress watched him with an expectant look. "Many apologies for keeping you from the heirs. I'm sure you have some celebrating to do, especially for reaching the level 27 class development. I have my own work and will not keep you long, but I believe this is a good time to seek a better understanding of you." She paused, cocking her head and considering the weapons mounted on the walls of the office. "You saved the lives of the heirs today. That dungeon should have killed you all. Single-handedly and without preparation, you managed to triumph over a threat I would have sent 2 accomplished teams against with every bit of foreknowledge I could provide. This is known to me and known to the heir's parents. That is a bond that does not weigh lightly. You are somebody now, Nathan Lark. Eyes will rest on you, including mine. I find myself wanting to know more about you. What is your background? What do you want? Great. Now she's going to ask after Earth. Some hint of Nathan's thoughts must have showed on his face, because Sudriel waved her hand dismissively. I don't want to know the details of your world. Whatever Giants Rest wanted is not of interest to me. Waking Giants know we don't need more disruption now. I want to know what Nathan Lark's plan is and why. Her elderly frame was full of poise and strength as she gazed at him over her glass, clearly inviting him to answer. Nathan took a deep breath to focus his mind and consider how to answer. He took another drink of the whiskey-esque drink to stall. She'd stated her goals simply and left it up to him how to respond. In a way, this was about the most efficient and polite interrogation Nathan could imagine. He couldn't help himself respecting that and feeling like he should be straight with her in return, which was probably exactly the intention here. Well, I certainly appreciate it more than Tial's approach. And Sudriel genuinely has only helped me. He opened his mouth and spoke. Slowly, haltingly. Earth is very different from here. There are many more people, no danger, no monsters or dungeons, very little conflict. There are nearly 8 billion people living there. I was born in one city of millions and was expecting to live my life in one such city or another, driven by where I could find interesting work. That statement clearly shocked Sudriel, but she didn't interrupt as Nathan continued. I had spent my entire life training for a job that is impossible to do here, and was close to reaching the most advanced qualification my world offers. It takes 20 years of education to get there, and I was almost there. Nathan thought of his graduate school research project, the threads of evidence he had been pursuing that would push the edge of human knowledge a little further forward. It would have allowed for more precise stem cell manipulation, holding potential for therapeutics and understanding mammalian development. A small step towards growing stem cell therapies, artificial organs, and better basic science. From here, his day-to-day experimental worries seemed less important. Even if his big experiment had failed, he would have learned something and set it up differently next time. I was ready to be happy with that life. It would have been slow, philosophical. A lifetime spent building knowledge to give to the next generation, just as generations before me have provided a foundation on which to build. I was ready to be another step in the pyramid that delivered us from suffering and death. Nathan realized his eyes were wet. He reached up to touch them, his fingers coming away wet with tears. He took another drink, looking at the ceiling for a moment as he tried to master his emotions. He looked back to Sudriel, who watched him kindly. She didn't seem in a rush to interrupt, so Nathan took another minute to collect his thoughts, to think upon what had changed and what his purpose was now. All of this had been swirling through his mind for weeks, but he hadn't verbalized it, hadn't expressed it even to himself. But then Tial brought me here. I have so many reasons to hate him, but just one of them is that he took that life from me, an existence that I wanted, that I worked for. Nathan put down his glass and scrubbed at his eyes again. Even if I could go back now, I would not. The ember of rage inside Nathan burned a little brighter, and he clenched his fists around his tears. I've discovered a love of battle, and the path of rage calls to me. I had dedicated myself to a peaceful life searching for knowledge, but I did it because that was the way I was best able to help people. I love knowledge, but the reason behind it was always to simply do good. And I find I love fighting, the thrill of breaking my foes, just as much as I ever did learning new things. Nathan's expression was firm, even as tears continued to trickle from his eyes. Tial showed me a great evil, up close and personal. What magic can do is amazing, and I wanted power like that for the longest time. I wanted to use it to fix things, make things better for all. But when I find people who have such power, They use it to control others, to subjugate their minds and make them slaves. Nathan found himself crying harder. He'd wanted so badly to have magic, for so long, even if he'd managed to mostly forget that dream. And then he'd met those with that power, and they were using it for the worst ends imaginable. Nathan's imagination spun out parallels between Earth's history of oppression and the horrors Giant's Rest could accomplish with even more power and control. He didn't need to see Giant's Rest's squalid slave barracks for himself to know what happened there. It felt like a betrayal, like Nathan's dream of wonder and power had turned to darkness and horror. He'd been confronted with a tool of great beauty bent to great evil, and Nathan found that his choices made him well-suited to ending the magic that made the horror possible. He couldn't use it, but he could break it. Nathan took a deep, shuddering breath and continued. I can do something about Giant's Rest. If I truly have the values I think I do, then I must fight them. Maybe I won't topple Giant's Rest, frustrate their genocidal ambitions, and free all of their slaves on my own. But with my talents, I stand a good chance of leaving a dent. A better one if I plan and get help. Even if I don't succeed, then another will have an easier time because of me. Less people will be enslaved. Maybe one of them will overthrow that empire of slavers. That thought that I will benefit those that come after, that's what drove me forward in science. It's the same thing driving me now. I can't be a scientist here and now. I don't have the resources, I don't have the class, but I can fight for what I believe in. Nathan rubbed his eyes again before looking around Sudriel's office. He delved deeply into his feeling of confusion. But then I came here and saw this city. Gemor stands against Giant's Rest, but your greatest threats are the dungeons and monsters of Davrar. And I think, can I take up this cause too? If a dungeon is built on magic, I can deal with it in a way few others can. I can help this city. Do I have that responsibility too? Nathan floundered for a second, looking for the next thought, but he felt wrung out. That was everything. He had done his best to honestly lay his dilemma before the guildmistress in the hope she could help him. Congratulations, you have developed the low-tier earnestness utility skill into mid-tier earnestness. Utility skill, mid-tier earnestness. This skill will help you portray your intense conviction and honesty when you speak to people. This skill will encourage people to be honest in return. Cannot fool truth spells or skills. He blinked the blue box away, waiting for the frail woman's response. She was giving his words due consideration, looking thoughtfully around the room. After a moment, she gestured to the weapons on the walls. Those belong to my family. They're a reminder of what I have lost and of my responsibilities. She pointed to the bow. Silka died to a disintegrate from Archmage Denar of Giant's Rest. Then she pointed at the swords. Kala died to a trap in an Edrani Empire gatehouse dungeon we were clearing to make a shorter path to the village of Terran. She pointed at her own spear, still propped in the holder next to the desk. I can make Gemor's adventurers capable of clearing dungeons without casualties, capable of winning fights against Giant's Rest. Both are necessary, but I won't dedicate this city to Giant's Rest's destruction. The majority of Gemor would not survive that fight no matter how it went. She pointed to Nathan last of all. You have an aspiration to destroy Giant's Rest, and I sympathize. By the endings, do I sympathize. But you also want to help Gemor against the dangers that assail us. Help us with our ongoing survival, and when you decide the time is right, I will help you with your goal. She paused, tapping a finger to her glass as she considered something. I will swear you an oath, upon my title as guildmistress and member of the Council of Gemor. May Davrar revoke my class if I forswear. Stay in Gemor for now, maybe until your next class development. Help us, and work with the heirs to ensure their safety and the safety of Gemor. Do this, and I will give you aid in your fight against Giant's Rest. I will introduce you to somebody who shares your goal, somebody powerful with multiple classes who wishes the destruction of Giant's Rest over all else. The heirs are unlikely to follow you to Giant's Rest. This is their home, and those who make war on Giant's Rest court a fate worse than death. You need allies when you decide to move against them, and I will bring you to their attention." Nathan picked up the glass, then offered another toast to Sudriel. She clinked his glass and they downed the rest of the liquor. His voice still had an edge of raggedness to it as he replied, "It's a deal." There was a long minute of silence as they sat there and considered what had passed. Then there was a faint knock on the door. Sudriel sighed and stood, collecting both glasses. "It seems the work must always continue. Do you have any final questions?" Nathan was about to shake his head when he remembered one more thing. "I meant to try to build a weapon. From home, the sort of thing that T.L. wanted. Nothing catastrophic, just a personal weapon. I intended to ask Cadid and Beatrid Bow about it. It involves new insights, I think. Is that okay?" Sudriel's eyebrows knitted together for a moment. "I will trust your judgment on the knowledge you share. If you speak to any, the Bows are a good choice. They hold their insights tightly and are trustworthy. And Gemor knows better than to seek their insights by guile or force, for those who insult the Bows tend to regret it. And you can be assured they will never treat with Giant's Rest." A moment passed, and then Sudriel waved towards the door. It opened as Nathan stood to leave. Siltal entered the room with some pieces of yellowed paper. Behind him stood Stanel Crusens, who was watching Nathan. He looked gorgeous, with corded muscles and sculpted features. Nathan was suddenly very aware he was shirtless, and that he had dried blood crusted into his belly button. As Nathan walked out of the office, Stanel clapped him on the shoulder. "Nathan, we should talk." He turned, and they descended the stairs together. Stanel led the way, and he moved slowly. "I hear you ranked up to 27 and set your feet on the path of anger." Stanel looked back up at Nathan, his gaze unyielding. "Does your rage skill say uncontrollable, or that you will be controlled by your anger?" Nathan paused for a moment, stopping to review the wording on Raging Thrill before he answered. "Class skill Raging Thrill. You can voluntarily enter and exit a rage state where you will be immersed in the thrill of combat. This will rapidly consume stamina but will increase your strength, speed, and resilience to damage." "No, it says immersed in." Stanel's face relaxed, his relief palpable. "That's good then. I've had some bad experiences with those who couldn't control themselves in their rage. Sounds like yours is better. See that you remain you when you rage." He shrugged and turned to keep descending the stairs, continuing to talk. "Heard you saved my kids' lives today, and the rest of the heirs." Nathan didn't say anything to that, just nodded a bit. "You seem to be from far off and without much in the way of resources. Let me know if you need anything. Maybe a new spear." Nathan looked up, and Stanel was grinning at him while he extended the butt of a new spear to Nathan. It looked identical to the old one, from the golden spearhead to the red blackwood haft. "I've got a bunch of those. I use them for throwing when I need a lot of penetration. I'll lodge a request that the head of the one I gave you gets retrieved. Those are the pricey part." Nathan took the spear. "Thanks, it was very useful against the Earth Stalkers, less so against the Sentry Constructs." Stanel shrugged. "That's the way of things, different tools for different jobs." He grew serious once more. "Do let me know if you need anything else, especially for adventuring. It doesn't seem like you'll destroy the bank on magical items, but I'll give you 1,000 spears if you'll keep my kids alive with them." Nathan stopped, mouth open. Well, this could certainly solve one problem for him. "Yeah, I have something in mind, actually. It might be a bit expensive, but it'll let me give Sarah a weapon neither of you have seen before." Stanel turned and looked back up the staircase at Nathan. "Is that so?" He raised an eyebrow and his hand flickered to his pouch. A string of coins flew at Nathan. They bounced off Nathan's chest, and he caught them. It was a full string of the highest denomination currency Gemor had before you started bartering magic items. Pretty much like somebody throwing you a hefty roll of $100 bills. On initial estimate, about 10 times as much as Nathan had gotten from rescuing a town's worth of people. "You've awakened my curiosity." Then Stainel turned and opened the door into the main hall of the Adventurers Guild. Thank you for listening to the story on KevinAudio.com Chapter 37 Back to Normalcy. The main hall was less rowdy than usual, with groups of adventurers talking to each other in hushed voices. Nathan listened closely and caught snatches of whispers. New dungeon on the North Road, dangerous as a dragon's nest. Guildmistress furious, there's still a dungeon in Old Gemor. It was clear that he and Stainel were objects of interest from the way people watched them. A gaunt black man raised a hand in acknowledgement, and Nathan returned it, recognizing him as Vihala's uncle. Cad had seemed like a fixture in the Adventurers Guild, and Nathan had been meaning to talk to him more, especially if he wanted to take advantage of the bow network to implement anything from Earth. Nathan looked around, but he didn't see any of the giant traders around. Maybe they were on errands, or had even accepted a job out of the city. Stainel led Nathan through the main hall and out into the night. Instead of leaving the guild and climbing the hill, they headed to a set of buildings that Nathan had never been into before. After navigating through a short series of halls, they emerged into a cozy room with a subdued party already underway. The heirs and their parents were scattered among a number of tables. There were snacks and drinks aplenty. It was a lot like the party at Stella's house the night Nathan developed magic absorption, except that the mood was more subdued, and the heirs were doing the lion's share of the talking. As Nathan and Stainel entered, the attention turned towards them. Kia elbowed Kacha and he stood. A cheer for Nathan Lark, the hero of the last dungeon of Old Gemor. Now, can somebody please get him a shirt? The rest of the room raised their glasses with a laugh and a cheer, and Stella chucked Nathan a spare shirt for the second time that day. He pulled it on, accepting a glass of the same purple liquor, was it called Umna, that he'd drunk at Stella's house. Kia simply wore a thin, padded gambeson, revealing her incredible figure. Her hair was loose and fell in a red-gold waterfall down her stacked and muscular frame. Man, all of my friends' parents are really hot. Also really badass. Those are definitely synergistic effects. They settled back into the party. After they'd gotten comfortable, Stainel prompted the heirs. You have survived your first true challenge where death was a true possibility. We are proud and relieved that you have returned whole and at a higher level than this morning. But hear me, events like that are difficult. You should speak of your thoughts of the day. This place is safe. We will not judge you for what you say, and we can share our hard-earned wisdom. Arl, can you begin? It can be simple as what you learned of your weapons. Arl nodded. I truly enjoy the greatsword. The feeling of momentum that no defense can block the next strike. The shorter weapons might be faster, but I prefer to end my foes with every strike, not harry them with smaller wounds. Sarah spoke next. I lack good armor-piercing weapons. I have javelins and heavy-throwing axes, but they are heavy and bulky, not well-suited to most fights. I need some way to penetrate armor that is more convenient. She shot her father a meaningful glance. Any chance I can have an enchanted weapon like that? He snorted. Not yet. I will not have you dependent on a specific weapon for now. Though, he tilted his head and raised his eyebrows questioningly at Nathan. Nathan shrugged and didn't say anything. I don't want to promise anything yet. I'm not sure I can or should try to build Sarah a gun. I can always return the money later, or not. He didn't attach a lot of strings. Stella broke into the silence, excitedly talking. I threw fireballs at live targets today and killed a bunch of them. It was amazing. And throwing fireballs close to Nathan and know that I'm helping him out was great. I worry about hurting my teammates with my magic, but his immunity makes me worry less. If he's swarmed by enemies, I can just blow him up. Then she grinned wide. And I'll have even more options with my next class development. Dalo shook his head. Stella, this isn't the time to speak of your class development choices. Sarah raised her glass, breaking the awkward moment. A cheer for Stella Caxow, a mage unparalleled for her age and level. May we all be useless as she blows up our foes from half a mile away. Stella flushed, embarrassed as her mother wrapped her in yet another hug and squeezed tight. Kachai rescued her by changing the subject. I relied on the strength of my arm and the thickness of my shield. The last dungeon of Old Gemor showed me that some foes will always have an arm stronger than my own. I must rely on the strength of my faith as the hammer that will lay my enemies low, and the shield that will protect my friends. My faith is more than just healing, for I worship the God of righteous battle. By the end of his statement, he'd picked up a faint golden glow. He looked to Kia for approval, and she gave him a slight smile and an even fainter nod. Nathan almost didn't follow up but decided to contribute. I have stepped onto the path of rage and found my fury is mixed with the thrill of battle. It calls to me, draws me in with the excitement of the fight. I must learn to balance the temptation of direct combat and the power my rage gives me against the advantage of being smart. I am best suited to attacks against mages or weak points. I can't let my rage dictate my battle tactics. Everybody nodded, though nobody made a comment. Dalo shot Stainel a sharp look, to which Stainel replied with a placating hand gesture. I bet Dalo was also worried about the rage. I hope Stainel can talk him down and I don't have to reassure Dalo and Cullel that I'm not going to snap and accidentally kill Stella in a fit of rage. Later on, the party more resembled a group therapy session. The heirs talked about the terror of being helpless under the day's beams and the swiftness of the stalker ambush. A common theme was the worry of being unable to use your skills and training when you were disabled or ambushed by foes that you could normally defeat in a head-on fight. Stella in particular seemed upset. If we hadn't known where the stalkers were hiding and that they were about to jump, they would have landed on every side of all of us. I don't think I could have done anything about that. I can kill a stalker with a fireball, but I can't fireball in every direction at once. Dalo smirked. Yet, Nathan shared his own worries. Against things that don't use magic, I am by far the weakest member of the team. I didn't fight the sentries, just ran past them. 2 stalkers were nearly too much for me, even when I had a weapon that was effective against them. You aren't bad, Arl reassured him. We'll practice together and find out how you can improve, especially now that you've developed your class. We'd cart around a lead brick if it could throw stunts like what you did at the dungeon. Stainel harumphed. And those sentries are tough ghoul uncles, that's sure and certain. Bypassing them was the right choice. They continued talking about the ways to deal with being ambushed and how to avoid debilitating mind spells. It boiled down to being cautious, careful, and ranking up skills and talents that helped you avoid dangerous situations or break mental spells. Damn, the combination of notice, magic absorption, and identify is potent for all of that. And focused mind, too. Good job, Nathan. I mean, I picked up notice and identify because perception is the best skill in D&D, closely followed by things that prevent you from getting disabled, and abilities let you figure out important details. If you can understand the bad guy's ritual, you stand a much better chance of sabotaging it. In a slight break from tradition, Arl mentioned that his warning, utility skill, had ranked up a lot today. It was still too low tier to be useful for anything but last-second dodges against known threats, but he hoped it would eventually provide a few seconds of warning against a trap or ambush. Sarah vowed to find a way to develop her mind protection skill until she was immune from magical effects like that days, and Kachai reiterated his desire to develop his faith beyond healing. Later in the night, once everyone was more than a bit drunk, Nathan admitted something he thought he'd keep secret. The night was cozy and it didn't feel like an atmosphere where anything was off the table. I thought about running away when one of the sentries cut my hand off. I could have just taken off down the street and I think they would have let me go. Mid-tier earnestness too achieved. Kachai and Sarah looked confused at the admission, while Arl and Stella looked upset and judgmental. Why did I share that? They're not going to trust me now. The guardians all looked serious after Nathan's admission and traded glances to decide who should answer him. Kia was the one to speak up. Her general mien was one of unwavering commitment to her cause, and Nathan expected her to judge him and call him a coward. The righteous path is difficult to walk, and one does not achieve it by embracing ignorance. You walked the righteous path today, Nathan Lark, and that you considered other paths does not make you cowardly, it makes you wise. She looked to Kachai, who was listening intently. Her next words were clearly meant for more than just Nathan. Sometimes the righteous path is shrouded, and you must consider every option in order to find it. The copper-haired woman sighed, looking at the floor. I have never abandoned a comrade, and I dread the day when it will be the correct choice. If you could not have succeeded, and your only chance of returning to warn Gemor was to flee in that instant, it would have been righteous to do so. Even if I am not sure I could have forgiven you. Well, that's a bit of a downer to think about. Maybe I was wrong about Gemor being close to me if I abandoned the heirs. Glad things turned out this way anyway. That moment of drama wasn't the end of the party, though the guardians seemed to have decided to lighten the mood. Kullal and Dalo started demonstrating some new spells they'd been working on. Unlike most of the magic Nathan had seen, they weren't designed for combat, but rather beauty. Stella's parents worked to interweave different opposing elements, pushing them as close together as possible without letting the mana touch. The pair spent 15 minutes building a sphere of fire and ice over the central table. The interlocking sheets and filaments of the two elements were gorgeous, with the clear ice diffracting and diffusing the flickering red and blue light of the flames. Kullal dimmed the magical crystal that lit the room, and the sphere cast an ever-shifting pattern of light around the partygoers. I need to remember that magic is a tool. The kind that lets you fly or blow stuff up is pretty cool. It's just a big sword. The kind that lets you control people is what needs to be exterminated. Stella has a joy for exploring Davrar's magic, and I love her passion for it. I want to see her discover more magic and help her along if I can. I can't explore magic myself, but I can help somebody else along that path. Nathan sat there, tipsy and sleepy, and looked around the room. The dappled light illuminated Stella, Kachai, Sarah, and Arl. He felt accepted now. It hadn't been a smooth road to get here, but they'd managed to establish a mutual respect and work through the initial bumps. Then there'd been the trials of the Blooding Patrol, and now this celebration had cemented the gains. It was different from Nathan's previous friendships. They were still younger than him. Immature at times, but it didn't matter. It wasn't the bond of a family, just squaddies, teammates, whatever you wanted to call it. They'd face whatever came their way together, and a few dumb comments hadn't mattered when they'd stood shoulder to shoulder against the monsters of Davrar. It was a bittersweet feeling, since Nathan fully expected to leave the heirs eventually, to return to Giant's Rest and his crusade. But until then, as he leveled up, he could enjoy their company and help keep Gemor safe. Not long after that, they went to bed. The party had diffused the confusion and terror of the day, and Nathan felt calm and centered. Nathan took a detour for a bath where he scrubbed himself clean. He'd gotten most of it earlier with rags, but the water cleaned out his fingernails, hair, and belly button. The water available in the bathing room wasn't particularly warm, but it was fresh and constantly flowing. Man, the Guardians have sure been around the block a time or two. That little party was masterfully done. We've worked through the tension and fear from the fight and bonded more as teammates. That I was invited at all suggests they approve of me. After that, Nathan meditated briefly before going to bed. The next morning started the same as most other mornings in the adventurer training course. They moved a little slower in their morning exercise than usual, but nobody was around to see. While they ran, they discussed the report they had to write for the guild, and that they'd spend a chunk of their group training time in the afternoon writing it up. Apparently Arl had the best handwriting. In the dining hall, they got a lot of stares. People had clearly heard rumors of what had happened but didn't know the specifics. Nonetheless, the tension in the room eased as the heirs sat down, joking and laughing with each other. If anything, Nathan thought the other teams were jealous of their laid-back attitude. He supposed it made sense. They'd passed through to the other side of the trail, bloodied but unbroken. All of the other teams here had yet to undertake their own blooding patrol. I just hope everybody's patrols are easier than ours. In class that morning, Jalba did a debrief of the heirs in front of the entire group. It was clear that this was more designed to show the other teams what their debriefs would be like than to pick on the heirs. He had them show their patrol area on a map, confirm the location of the stalker ambush, and recount what they'd done with the corpses afterwards. Arl fanned out all of the stalker teeth on the desk and made a show of counting them and holding up the patriarch tooth. Even Simla looked impressed. The well-dressed, dark-skinned adventurer was normally hostile to the heirs and Jalba's agenda, so Nathan would count that as a win. Then, they got to the dungeon. Jalba made sure they didn't show where it was on the map. He sighed, looking out over the class. Yeah, the heirs found a dungeon yesterday. It wasn't something anybody expected, and that's exactly what kills a team. When you find something like that, you run. You leave and report back so we can make a threat assessment. We're not going to go into details, but that's basically what they did, with one exception. Nathan, join me. Nathan walked up to the front of the room. Jalba put a gentle hand on Nathan's shoulder and looked into his eyes. He fanned them outwards, putting the conversation on display for the rest of the class. You ran towards the dungeon. Why? Nathan paused for a moment, uncertain. It seemed like everybody had approved of his actions. Was he going to get taken to task for it now in front of all the trainees? There were magical devices that were suppressing the heirs with magic. I had to take them down so we could run away. Jalba frowned at him. Yeah, and there were other defenses you were able to draw off as well by charging. I respect that, but could you have run back and helped your teammates flee, gotten them into the buildings, then returned to Gemor without risking everything? Nathan shook his head. It wouldn't have worked. The sentries were charging at us and I needed to distract them, and the other defenses. Me charging let the heirs flee on their own. Jalba nodded. He released Nathan and looked back to the class. And that's the important part. I wasn't there, so I can't judge what would have been possible. If Nathan could have assisted his team in fleeing, then that would have been better. But since that wouldn't have worked, he did the right thing by disabling the thing that kept them from running away and then running the fuck away. When you're the person standing in front of the fire, you make the decision with the information you have. It's important that you make the smartest decision you can, but you need to commit to it. Don't let me, or anyone else, second-guess you afterwards. I wasn't there. Just don't make decisions for glory. Endings, the heirs ran the fuck away, and now they're getting praised and paid for it. That's the lesson I want you to learn. Chapter 38 Connections of Crafting. After a more normal lunch, the heirs went back to their rooms to write the report. This mostly consisted of Arl writing down every detail each person could remember about their encounter with the last dungeon of Old Gemor. That name was becoming more and more official, and it's how they titled the report. They made a small diagram of the street, with the buildings and bunkers marked out. Nathan noted the approximate extent of the illusion and described the behavior of the sentries. He used his new mind palace to recall more details, including the exact shape of the front of the building. It wasn't what the mental construct was for, but combined with enhanced memory, it let him draw out an approximation of the facade. Stella helped him with the details of the mysterious, light-based spell glyph. Mid-tier enhanced memory 3 achieved. While Sarah and Arl went off to deliver the report to Siltal, the rest of the heirs talked about magic. Following off of their goals from last night, both Katja and Stella wanted to develop their magic. Stella was waiting to go home in the evening for her class development, but expected to get access to at least one more mana type. Regardless, With her new class skills and enlarged mana pool, she should be able to execute more complicated and powerful spells. She confessed that she really wanted to get lightning or light mana. My dad's an expert with lightning mana and my mom can do art with light mana, and they're so cool. Then she heaved a deep sigh. But you mostly have to get light and lightning mana from class developments. Nobody understands them well enough to get the mana types from insights. Well, except some Giant's Rest archmages, but they keep that knowledge close. Wait, I bet I can help with that. I know the physical basis for light and electricity, and I want to live vicariously through Stella discovering the truth behind them. Nathan interrupted Stella's complaining about how stupid Giant's Rest was with that thought. Hey, I might be able to help with those insights. Not promising anything, but it's worth a try. I know a little something about how lightning and light work. Her gaze snapped to him, both suspicious and hopeful. We'll talk after I develop my class. I hope you're right, for your sake. Might be irrelevant. I think one of my classes will give me access to at least one. Kachai watched the exchange, then apprehensively asked his own question. Nathan, I hope you will help me develop offensive uses of faith, even if you don't have any insights to share, he added teasingly. I would still appreciate you being a target of my attempts. Your ability to feel mana and yet be immune to it is invaluable for practice. Kia has her advice, but much of it is go kill something. It's of limited use. Nathan smirked. He could definitely see Kia saying that. Sure, though I have to say the divine mana is weird. It's very emotional. Are you sure Damon won't be upset by you using mana like that in practice? Frivolously, I mean. Kachai looked confused by Nathan's question. The gods do not intervene with mortal events. Their power exists and can be accessed with the proper phrases, conviction, and faith. But Damon does not speak to me, and I do not ever expect him to. Her power without communication. Most D&D settings have gods speaking to their worshippers to send them on quests or something, or at least have it generally be known that it can happen. Strange. Nathan shrugged. The cosmology here was weird, and it was on his list of things to investigate. But Nathan had already decided it wasn't a priority. He had his goals lined up in front of him, and number one was making himself and the other heirs as powerful as possible. Shortly afterwards, Sarah and Arl returned with the coin for discovering the dungeon. Nathan's share was less than he'd earned for rescuing a village of people, but not by much. Rescuing one village. A good unit of measure if ever there was one. But I'm glad that they prioritize rescuing people. The rest of the heirs were excited to talk to their parents about their recent rank-ups and developments. They'd have a lot to practice in upcoming days, it seemed. Nathan was also excited, if for different reasons than the others. He did want to talk to Arthur about his own class development, but he was more intent on asking him about Davrar. The sort of questions that would immediately out Nathan as not from Davrar. Like what in the ever-living hell an ending was. He'd needed to ask those questions when he'd first arrived in Davrar, and gotten lucky that the giant traders were good people. He'd considered bringing the heirs in on the secret, but decided there wasn't much point. It didn't change much except increase the number of people who knew his secret, and among people who were still somewhat immature and could potentially spread it further. He also wanted to talk to Beatrice about the possibility of firearm manufacture. The more Nathan thought about it, the more he thought that he did want to try building a gun. At this point, he liked the heirs. He wanted to leave them with some of his strength, if he could. And it might get him more credit with Stainel for future insight bargaining if he provided the weapon master and his daughter with guns. But only if he could do it without unleashing the secret upon the world. There had been a period of artisans building exquisite, custom firearms on Earth before they'd become mass-produced. He could take several measures to avoid the possibility of ranks of slave soldiers with muskets, keeping firearm manufacture localized to a few experts. First, treat the details like an insight, and tell only the bows and those they trusted how to make guns and gunpowder. If it worked out as well as Nathan thought, then they'd be plenty motivated to keep the secrets to themselves. He would almost prefer to do everything himself, but there was no way he would be capable. Second, do not introduce the idea of a production line, at least until Giant's Rest was already on the ropes. All of the guns Nathan wanted to make were going to be made by individual craftspeople doing every step of the manufacturing. That would help with secrecy and keep the volume down. Third, make sure his damnedest that the guns weren't sold on the open market. The worst-case scenario would be for a Giant's Rest agent to waltz into a store and buy one so that it could be studied and duplicated. Fourth, because the guns wouldn't need to be otherwise enchanted very heavily, they could build in some sort of self-destruct mechanism once the owner died, or something like that. And fifth, try to make the guns as advanced as possible. If he made something more complex and capable, it would be harder to understand, harder to duplicate. If you were making breech-loading, metal cartridge rifles, then somebody else was much less likely to think it was worth building a smoothbore muzzleloader, even if they somehow caught wind of the critical insights. People would need more information and skill to duplicate the design and would be more likely to fail. But if they do succeed, then it is worse. You gotta take a risk every once in a while. With that decided, Nathan followed the heirs out of their rooms. They all split off to their respective mentors. Nathan looked around, but he couldn't find Arthur. After a moment he saw Cadid, Vihala's uncle. The dark-skinned man with white hair was waving vigorously at him, so Nathan walked over. Cadid offered a handshake and a wide grin. "Glad to catch your attention. Vihala and the giant traders left in a hurry yesterday on a job, headed towards Giant's Rest as you'd expected." He shrugged. Arthur said sorry and hoped your blooding patrol went well. The man's face split into a huge grin again, as if sharing a private joke. "We know how that went. They're in for a bit surprise when they get back. Anyway, you'll have to make do with me for now. I can't help you too much with what Arthur was teaching, but we could probably do some perception drills. Vihala told me what she gave you. I don't utterly approve, but she's got the favors to make it not a problem. So, what do you want?" Nathan was briefly disappointed that Arthur and the rest of the giant traders had left. He'd have to delay his questions. But on a second thought, this would certainly work fine for his purposes. "I want to try to make something, or commission it, something new. I need to talk to a metal worker like Beatrid and an alchemist. I don't know if any of those are in the family, but I'd love to talk to them." Cadid frowned at him. "No alchemists, but I can take you to Beatrid and introduce you to the guy we trust for important stuff. His name's Poppy, funnily enough. Can he keep an insight to himself? The things I want to make, they're the sort of things I don't want sold around to just anybody. And can we get both of them together? What I want to make requires both an alchemist and a weaponsmith." Nathan was hesitant. He wasn't sure if this was a common practice. The old man stroked some white stubble on his chin, working his jaw. "Poppy's good folk. Is that how it'll be, It'll be expensive for that, depending on the insight and their interest. But you've earned a bit of interest, and if you've got the coin, it's worth a conversation. Let's go get Beatrid and drop by Poppy. I think she'll be able to leave the store. My great-nephew's supposed to be there today." Nathan shrugged and followed the man. They stopped briefly by Beatrid's place. Cadid mentioned that Nathan had something special to commission and that she should follow them. Beatrid looked more like Vihala's sister than a cousin. She was a good deal taller but shared the same dark brown skin and burly build. Her dreadlocks were shorter and bound back tightly. She frowned at Nathan, clearly deciding whether this was worth her time. Nathan held up his hands. "It's a new kind of weapon. It's dangerous. I want to give one to Sarah Crusens. If it works, I won't be surprised if Stanel will want one, but we need to keep it secret like an insight." Her eyebrows shot to her hairline. Getting a weapon of mine in that weapon master's hands, and you're on his kid's team, yeah. All right, this is worth hearing. She called out to the preteen who was scurrying around the shop, cleaning the displays. Hey, Erlin, manage the shop. Don't let anybody haggle you on any of the enchanted gear at all. She turned back to Cadid. Where are we going? Cadid waved them out of the building. Poppies. Nathan's new weapon needs a weaponsmith and an alchemist. I'm a bit curious, but if it's an insight, I probably don't need to know. You can handle the family interests. Cadid and Beatrid walked Nathan to a part of the city he hadn't been in before. It was farther from the gates than the Adventurers Guild and was dominated by moderate-sized shops selling finely crafted goods. Furniture, tools, artwork, and basic enchanted objects were most common. A few stores had books, but if Nathan was parsing the signage right, they were pretty expensive. They came to a shop labeled Poppy's Potions. The exterior wood was stained an even, bright green, very much setting the shop apart from all the stone buildings on the street. It was also only 2 stories tall, compared to the 4 stories of most of the constructions. They pushed through the curtain blocking the door and entered a dim room lit entirely by glowing potions racked in glass-fronted cabinets. Welcome to Poppy's Potions. What wondrous mixture can I supply you, Beatrid? What brings you up here at this time of day? The man speaking stood behind a desk, partially obscured by a haze of smoke coming from the pipe he was puffing on. Beatrid stepped to the side and tapped on a crystal above a shelf. It lit with a white glow, illuminating the inside of the shop in its entirety. The room was long and narrow, and at the back was a wide desk. Behind it stood Poppy, who was an orc. The second orc Nathan had seen on Davrar. The first orc had been a huge, muscular warrior with emerald green skin back in the Adventurers Guild. Poppy had the same color of skin as that orc, but he was short, thin, and balding. He put a pair of spectacles he'd been polishing back on his nose, squinting at the group. He straightened to his full height, which wasn't much taller. If Poppy was over 5.5 feet tall, Nathan would be surprised. The orc didn't even seem especially old. Cadid raised his hand. See you round. I'll be in the Adventurers Guild. He slid through the curtain and out into the street. Beatrid gestured at Nathan, indicating it was his show. With both of the crafters looking at him, Nathan took a deep breath. He knew what he wanted, but he wanted to be upfront about his conditions. He leaned on his earnestness as he spoke. I want to make a new kind of weapon that needs both alchemy and steelwork. I don't know if we'll be able to do it, but I'll pay to try. And if it works, well, it's dangerous, so I want to be upfront that I want to treat the weapon and its manufacture like an insight, only to be sold to trusted people that I approve of. But part of the weapon needs to be replaced after it's used, so even after I make one, we'll have to keep paying you for parts to keep using it. Both Beatrid and Poppy were frowning at Nathan as he talked. Poppy fed and spoke first. If you gotta pay to use it, why'd anybody want it? Beatrid, who's this adventurer and why are we listening to him? Beatrid shrugged. Vihala brought him in from the wilds a few weeks ago. He's on a team with the heirs, Yano, with Stainel's kids and all the kids of the Guardians. There was some hubbub about them discovering a new dungeon, so he's got some coin. She shifted her attention to Nathan. What you've described sounds pretty shit unless it'll kill a wyvern. People have made poison capsule weapons before, you know. That ain't new. Nathan shook his head. That's not it. One of these could kill a wyvern from far away without it ever seeing you. Look, let's sit down to discuss. I need to draw some schematics, and there are some other insights I can share to sweeten the deal if needed. Poppy shrugged and scrubbed his mostly bald head with a green hand. All right, come on back into my workshop. They followed him through another curtain into a back room the same size as the shop. There was a bench along the far wall that had multiple concoctions boiling away above magical heat sources. Some of them were connected to a complex distilling apparatus. A central table held more glassware, scales, and several cutting boards. About a third of the room was dedicated to storage, with meticulously labeled but somewhat disorganized shelves and boxes. Nathan recognized the active lab space and immediately felt at home. Funny that being in a lab makes me feel comfortable. Ah yes, nostalgia for dangerous chemicals. There was a large slate propped against one wall, and Poppy scrubbed it clean before handing Nathan a piece of chalk. Then he grabbed a pair of stools, offering one to Beatrice and taking the other for himself. He yawned as he sat down. Go ahead. We won't tell people about this, but no oaths or anything just yet. Great. Now Nathan just had to properly explain how to make a gun. Chapter 39 Explanations of Explosive. Nathan started by drawing a tube on the board. You start with a metal tube. One end is capped, the other end is open. Then you put a piece of metal inside. Nathan drew a bullet-shaped piece of metal near the closed end of the tube. Then, you put a little bit of something explosive here at the closed end of the tube. Nathan drew a star shape behind the bullet. When you set off the explosive, it sends hot gas everywhere. But the metal tube is strong, so the explosion can only go one direction. Out the tube, pushing the metal, we call it a bullet along with it. Nathan added an arrow showing the bullet's motion. He could see both Poppy and Beatrice considering the diagram. They'd been nodding along with the explanation but didn't seem excited about it. He continued. The thing is that if the bullet fits tightly in the tube called a barrel, then it leaves going incredibly fast. It'll go really far and can go through a person. Or a wyvern if you use a bigger explosive and a longer tube. Nathan added a bunch more arrows to represent the bullet's speed. That made Beatrice consider. She shrugged, looking at the diagram. A bow or crossbow do about the same in the right hands. Maybe not as fast, but Stanel can still kill a wyvern that way. It'd be cheaper than this, and you would just need a pile of arrows, not a packed tube for every shot. Nathan nodded. He'd thought about the bow comparison. Yeah, but a gun, which is what this weapon is called, has 3 really big advantages. First, it can be a lot smaller than a bow or crossbow. All of the energy is in the explosive, not in the arms of the bow or crossbow. So a gun about this big, Nathan held his hands about a foot apart, can still propel a bullet fast enough to kill. Second, because the bullet is lighter than an arrow or bolt and flies so much faster, it won't drop very much over time. If you cut grooves on the inside of the barrel, then the bullet will spin, which will make it fly straight. A well-built gun with a long barrel can hit a man-sized target from a mile away, even before classes and skills get involved. Nathan drew a spiral pattern down the length of his barrel to represent rifling. Third, you can make a system that opens the tube and replaces the bullet and explosive propellant quickly. There's a few ways to do it. All of them put the bullet and propellant together into something called a cartridge. Nathan drew a casing around the bullet and explosive. If you do it right, you can fire another new bullet quickly, like this. Nathan started snapping his fingers rapidly. Poppy finally had enough and stood up, yelling, "Except that explosives are fucking expensive. You need magical ingredients, and the most accessible one is an eye from a fire stalker. I can make about this much fire blast powder from a fire stalker eye." He held his fingers close together, almost touching. This gun would cost as much as a bag of holding to fire once. Nathan smiled. He'd wondered what their chemistry versus alchemy knowledge was, and why somebody hadn't invented guns before if they had fine metalwork. It seemed he had part of his answer. I know how to make a non-magical explosive using things you probably have the ingredients for. Doing it properly requires some care, but looking around this lab, I think you could do it. And the ingredients are probably cheap. Poppy stood open-mouthed for a moment, then sat back down very politely. "Carry on," Beatrice broke in. "We already have some enchanted weapons kinda like this. Bolters. They'll fire a bolt real hard just with the enchantments. Expensive as adamant, and they drain mana like nothing else. But it ain't that different." She eyed the bullet. "Not much room for enchantments on one of those. And if it goes as fast as you say, then I doubt you can use the same one multiple times. Nathan shrugged. Those were fair criticisms. He'd certainly give up multiple limbs to get the weapon that came to mind when he heard the term bolter. I don't know how a bolter would stack up to a gun, but we could probably make this without any enchantments at all. They'll be handy to light the propellant and keep the barrel from getting dirty from the explosions, but I know ways to do all of this. Nathan gestured at the board. Without magic. It's complicated and there's a dozen problems that require solutions, but I think we can solve them and make this into a real weapon. Mid-tier enhanced memory 4 achieved. Mid-tier earnestness 3 achieved. They both sat with that for a second, thinking about it. Beechrid nodded first. Not needing enchantments changes some things. It'd be a tricky piece of metal, especially to swap out bullets and close the tube again, and get rid of the leftover case from the last bullet. Interesting. Got a couple ideas, but if we get it to work and somebody gets some skills around this weapon, it could have some real power. Depends on if we can work out a way to shoot faster or farther than a good bow. Poppy pointed at the diagram again. If it's in a metal case like that, how do you light the propellant, especially without magic? The skinny orc wasn't being challenging. His eyebrows were furrowed, and it was clear he was dedicating his full attention to Nathan's proposal. Simple enough. You leave a small gap in the back of the casing and fill it with a different kind of explosive that will go off with impact. It's called the primer. But if you recess it into the case a little bit, then nothing will hit it very easily by accident. The only way it goes off is if you have a metal rod that sticks out of the back of your cylinder like this and strikes the back of your cartridge when you want your bullet to fire. Nathan drew more things on the diagram, finishing up by sketching a brief rifle grip profile around the barrel. And you know how to make this primer? Poppy was looking at him with surprise. His fingers were twiddling in his lap, as if they wanted to grab tools and start working. He was clearly enthused about what Nathan was describing. Pending utility skill, low-tier lecturing, you have explained a complex and novel concept and taught 2 masters something new in their field. This skill will help you explain plans and details clearly in the future, smoothing over gaps and aiding in explanation and understanding. Will not help you convey details you do not know, and will not help you suppress people's doubts about what you are teaching. Okay, that's something to consider. Let's find out if I'll be explaining anything more today. Nathan nodded, lowering his arm from the slate. Yeah, but before we get into any more technical insights, I want to paint a picture for you. Imagine we figure out how to make guns and they work well. We make a weapon that fires a bullet faster than the eye can see and can kill from far away. We figure out how to make it easily and make a lot of them for a lot of adventurers. But then Giant's Rest gets some and figures out how they work. They have legions of slave artisans to make things, right? They put them to work making guns, and they issue them to slave soldiers who stand in ranks. A rank of slave soldiers with guns, shooting hundreds of enchanted bullets. I think that would change the dynamic of warfare and not in a good way. That could happen. I do not want that to happen. So before I tell you any more, we're going to swear to each other not to reveal this. We're going to treat all of the details on how to make guns as an insight. Any guns we make are going to be one of a kind, sold to people we trust, and I'd prefer them to have some kind of self-destruct enchantment on them. Nathan stopped and looked around, gauging their reactions. They were hesitating, looking at each other and thinking it over. I can give you other insights too from the same place these came from. He gestured towards Beechrid. Some tips on alloying and metallurgy. He pointed at Poppy. And some tips on chemistry. We'll need to talk about what to share and what not to share. Beechrid put out one hand, palm up, and spoke. I swear by my family and our history as escaped slaves not to share the insights related to the manufacture of guns and cartridges without agreement of all here now. I will not see Giant's Rest aided from any invention I make. I further swear that if any others share these insights without my permission, I will bend all of my resources to hunting them down. May Davra revoke my class if I break this oath. Poppy was visibly surprised, leaning backwards. He swore, "Harpy's tits. I don't have much of a choice, do I? But yeah, I'm in. I need to know how to make this non-magical explosive." His eyes were hungry and he lifted his hand. I swear by my own desire for knowledge, which led me to abandon tradition and home, that I will not share the insights related to the manufacture of guns, explosives, or cartridges without permission from both Beatrid and Nathan. I will hunt down any who share this insight without permission. I speak this oath honest and true, and may Davrar strike my class from me if I break it. He lowered his hand, shaking his head. I'd have to be an idiot to trust Giant's Rest anyway. I've heard they don't take kindly to orcs. Idiots. They wouldn't stand up for 5 minutes to the true Imperial army. Then it was Nathan's turn. He considered his words for a moment, then spoke. These insights are mine, so I will not swear to keep them secret from all others. But I swear by my desire to see Giant's Rest destroyed that I will do all in my power to keep this knowledge from Giant's Rest, and will discuss with you both if at all possible before I tell any others. I will hunt down any who break this oath, with every ounce of strength left in my body. May Davra revoke my class if I break this oath. No blue boxes appeared, but Nathan had a sense of foreboding. He wasn't sure about it, but the atmosphere in the room made it feel like there would be consequences for breaking an oath made that invoked Davrar as punishment, and they probably wouldn't swear that oath unless it did something. With a thought, Nathan accepted a pending skill. He could always ditch this one later. He strongly doubted it would be permanent, but it would be useful now and might be useful for teaching Stella. Congratulations, you have accepted the low-tier lecturing utility skill. They all took a deep breath and then Poppy grabbed another stool for Nathan. Okay, now we've initiated the gun cabal. Let's get some insights into the open so it's a true cabal. I want to know how to make this explosive. Can you walk me through it? Nathan nodded, reviewing his recollections of black powder. Yeah. Got 3 components. I know them as charcoal, saltpeter, and sulfur. Do you have them accessible? Poppy frowned, getting up and scanning his shelves of materials. Of course I know what charcoal is. I use some ground charcoal to make inert water. He grabbed a small drawer from one of the cabinets and set it on the central table. It held a couple of small cloth bags that leaked black dust. I've also got some sulfur. Use a bit of it in a bunch of different stuff. Not particularly cheap. He pulled out another drawer which was sealed with a metal plate. As for saltpeter, I don't know the term. What's it used for? Nathan shrugged. It's a pretty standard oxidizer. Hold on, I'm going to use a skill to see if I can get any more information. He sat down on the stool and closed his eyes, searching back in his memory for details about potassium nitrate. Saltpeter. It had been mined and produced from manure in a variety of ways. What had it been used for besides gunpowder? Well, fertilizer, obviously. It was purified nitrogen from manure, but it was usually easier to just use the straight manure unless you were doing chemistry. What else had people purified saltpeter for? Right, food preservation. It's great for curing meat. Nathan pulled out a packet of jerky that he kept on hand for stamina replenishment. Is this cured with straight salt? They both looked at him with some level of confusion. Poppy shrugged. I don't know. There's a place that makes it not too far away. Let's go find out. Poppy moved a shelf to free the door, then locked up the shop. He led them down the street. As they walked, Beatrid looked over at Nathan. How do you know this stuff anyway? I'm still not sure I believe it all, but if you can make the necessary boom, then that'll change. We'll need to go over specific designs for me to start working on. I think those casings might be tricky. Are they crimped around the bullet? Can't be steel if so. Nathan grinned. How I know it is a whole other insight worth more than this one. And yeah, the casings are usually made from brass. They can be reused if they're made right. Poppy walked quickly, clearly impatient to get where they were going. The building really wasn't set all that far away and resembled a low warehouse with an abundance of chimneys. They walked straight into the front room, which doubled as a store and an office. Racks of jerky and other cured meats were laid out, and farther back were large bags waiting for pickup. There was a skinny woman manning the desk in the corner. She looked up when they entered. Poppy took the lead. "Kerr, good to see you. 1,000 apologies for the hurry, but we've got a quick question about the curing process, and we might want to buy something you use for it." Nathan stepped forward. "It's a white powder which you use to cure meat. Creates a red color in the meat when you rub it in. It isn't salt, but probably tastes a bit like it. Do you know what I mean?" The woman looked up at them, a bit taken aback by the sudden onslaught. "Yeah, I think we got that. You want some? It ain't cheap." She named a price for a bag that made Poppy blanch. It was a fair chunk of change and clearly a good portion of the jerky's cost. Nathan stepped forward. "It's okay, I got this." He certainly had money to burn, especially with the money that Stanel had given him. He showed her the coins. "Can we see it to be sure it's right?" Kerr shrugged and waved them farther back into the working space of the building. She led them to a storage room and pointed to a stack of large bags. The top one was open, and she scooped out a handful of small white crystals. It looked right. Nathan took a crystal and stuck it into his mouth. Salty, but not table salt. It tasted a bit cool, which was weird. If it was used to cure meat, it was probably potassium nitrate. Could be sodium nitrate, which would still work but would be harder to keep dry. This stuff doesn't seem hydrated. Might be a mix of the two. Nathan handed Kerr the coins, then hefted one of the bags. They were the size of Nathan's torso, awkward and heavy. Nathan wouldn't be surprised if the bag was nearly 100 pounds. He walked it back out of the building, then into the street. He focused on keeping a hold on the bag as they headed back to Poppy's shop. Poppy was bouncing around like a puppy. The frail orc clearly couldn't wait to see what would happen. He unlocked the door again and ushered in Nathan and Beatrice, then hustled to clear a space for the bag. Nathan dropped the bag and stretched, looking around the room. Poppy was already sawing away at the bag with a small knife. "What's the mixture ratio?" The answer was on the tip of Nathan's tongue. 15 parts saltpeter, 3 parts charcoal, 2 parts sulfur, all ground and finely mixed. It won't explode very well unless you do another step, but it'll burn real strong. The orc was hurrying around, getting out a scale and measuring charcoal dust into a stone mortar. "I hope to the divine you mean those numbers are weight fractions." "Yes. What do you take me for, a barbarian?" Nathan nodded in the affirmative, then stood back with Beatrice as the alchemist spent a few minutes measuring the ingredients before carefully grinding them together. He stirred the mixture with a wooden stick for a moment, then looked at Nathan. "Do I just light it on fire?" Nathan looked at how much Poppy had made. It was a decent amount, maybe a pile the size of a fist. "Probably better to just do a little first, yeah. I don't know exactly how strong this will be. Let's put most of it somewhere safe and then light just a little with a long stick." Poppy rolled his eyes. "Do you look at me and see a fool? But fire will set it off. It won't go off if I drop it, like fire stalker extract." He was already busily scooping most of the powder into a wide-mouthed glass bottle, which he stoppered and put behind some shelves. On a metal sheet in the middle of the table, he left a small pile of dark powder, an inch or two tall. Nathan stepped back, shaking his head. "It'll only go off with fire." Beatrice stepped further back as Poppy grabbed a heavy leather apron and donned a pair of thick glasses. He pulled out a magical rod and the end started smoldering red-hot. Without further ado, he poked the rod into the pile. It whooshed to life immediately, sending a small plume of smoke into the rafters and leaving behind black residue. Low-tier lecturing 2 achieved. Yeehaw!